Welcome to Marin Women's Hall of Fame. I'm Jenna Childers. We're talking tonight with Ruth Susler, a 1997 inductee into the Marin Women's Hall of Fame. Ruth is being honored for her work in special education and vocational counseling with high school students and students of many generations. Welcome, Ruth.
Thank you very much.
It was a lovely event, that dinner that was given in which you were brought into the Hall of Fame. How did that evening strike you?
I thought about it a lot. In fact, I was frightened at the thought of having to speak at this lectern with 440 people there. But I have to say it was probably one of the most exciting events that I had ever taken place in. Aside from having my children and getting married, I think that probably was part of the top events of my life.
It brought a lot of people from your life together.
Not so much physically there, but what it did was kind of my telephone, the day it appeared in the IJ, I heard from 4 women that I had worked with the solo project. And they were all doing well. I bumped into someone in the line at Safeway. I saw your picture in the paper. And that's gone on. I mean, it's like, wow, all these people saw me, they knew who I was, and they were kind of as excited as I, because they never knew anyone that ever made it. I mean, it's been going on for 10 years, and they didn't know anyone that went in.
Well, in 35 years of teaching, you've touched many, many lives.
Aside from that, I did have the experience of working for the Office of Employment and Training for 16 years, where I touched more lives than just at the TAM district.
And you mentioned the solo program and Cal Learn. Those are just 2 of the programs.
Solo program we administered for 9 years. It was for displaced homemakers, single mothers, helping them get vocational training, doing some testing assessment, more or less acting as a mentor to support their return to the world of work. Cal Learn is ongoing. It started 3 years ago. It's primarily for teen mothers or pregnant teenagers under the age of 19 on AFDC. That's why we don't handle everybody. It's a very specific criteria. And my job is to get them through the high school process so that they can go on to vocational training and become, financially independent. And that's probably been one of the most rewarding programs I've worked with.
Those are just 2, though, of a number of programs that you've worked with, almost all of them aimed in one way or another at helping students graduate from high school and get jobs.
Yeah.
And students who maybe didn't find that an easy road.
I specialized probably in what you would consider high risk. I did special education for 14 years at TAM. I worked with the high risk population for 16, 18 years. I work with young people in group homes, those youngsters who are economically disadvantaged, physically handicapped. Yeah, I'd say that was, and then, I also worked at continuation school, which primarily has the young person who is quite bright but unable to adjust to the regular school environment. And they're probably the most challenging I worked with.
I have heard it said of you that you and the work programs that you were responsible for have helped over 300 students find their first job.
Right.
That's quite an accomplishment. I have one big question for you.
How?
How? And maybe a second big question, why?
There are certain young people who need to have the first step out. They haven't got enough self-esteem to go on an interview, to find a job. They need some support. And a lot of those programs were supported, and still are, by the Office of Employment and Training and the Private Industry Council. They recognize that if we don't step in now, this young person is going to falter. I mean, he may at some point in time find himself, but between the time he's in high school and when he finds himself, it's a very desolate spot to be in. So basically that's my thing. Of course, my own kids, I didn't help too well find jobs. They were like on their own. They didn't qualify for my programs.
They helped themselves find those jobs. Huh?
I think they had to.
Still the record stands. Hundreds of students whom you have helped, given a helping hand to along the way. Let's go back to that really big overarching question, why? Why is it that you could look at a student that somebody else would consider high-risk youth, and you could see a graduate?
I really don't know when that started with me. I basically was a physical education teacher. I was trained in it. I've got my bachelor's is in it. My master's degree is in it from the University of Illinois. I think it started when I began to substitute at the special ed class at Tamalpais High School. I fell in love with the kids.
And when was that?
1956, 57, because they hired me in 58. And I started that, and I found a lot of challenge and a lot of rewards with it. But I was very fortunate because I had a home situation that would permit me to go out and do these things. I had a very strong husband. I had 3 kids who basically went through the hippie, but not so bad that I, had to spend all my time taking care of them. So I had all this extra energy, and they were very supportive. Mm-hmm. They gave me the space, the time, and the encouragement. But I think my background, as I was growing up, may have something to do with it. I was born in Chicago. My mother and father were from Europe. English was a second language, as I was telling you. Everyone spoke Yiddish in the whole neighborhood. I didn't have one friend that had parents born here in the United States. Not one. We all went to the same elementary school. It was just like, a ghetto in a way, but a very different kind. They had one room there that they called the ungraded classroom, and it was like, everybody kind of looked at it funny. And then I started to work. When I was about 16, 17, I worked at a settlement house. And I had a bunch of teenage girls that were not doing so great. They were like 14, 15, and that really started the whole process. You find PE teachers, recreation people, they do or feel more than just the classroom. They always say, oh, the PE, they're not smart, they don't. But I have to tell you, I went to the University of Illinois, and it was hard getting a degree. It was all scientific. I didn't think it was going to be. I thought I was going to just play games, but I think it started then.
As you look back on those early years in that Chicago neighborhood growing up with a family and a close community, are there certain values that you see now that you learned in those years?
My mother, she was just a terrific example for me. She actually was my role model. My mother came over, I think she was 14, 15. Her sister brought her over. She didn't speak English, didn't read English. Found a job, went to night school, learned all of those. Always spelled phonetically. If she wrote you a letter, you had to read it out loud because that's the way, When I graduated from high school, World War II was on, and my father was more enthusiastic that I get a job in the war industry. But my mother went to work, and she financed me through the University of Illinois. This was a woman who had stayed home for 18, 20 years and had never done anything. And she went to work and put me through school. And I've always appreciated my brother and I. It was education. You were going to go to college. You were going to go to... There was never any doubt. She had this strong appreciation for education, and she instilled it in us.
And how was it that you came from the Midwest of the United States to the extreme West Coast?
Well, my husband and I were both graduates. He majored in PE, just as I did. But he had asthma as a result of World War II, and he said, anyone who sends me a contract without an interview in California or Arizona, we're going. So lo and behold, he got a contract for Riverbank. Do you know where that is?
Oh, my.
It's 10 miles from Modesto, and it's this tiny little town. So we ended up there for 1 year, and then he came and started to work at Larkspur Corn and Madera. That's how we migrated here. He spent about 32 years, I think, in Richmond School District.
So he was working in the Richmond School District from the 50s, from about the 50s?
Yeah, probably.
Mm-hmm. And then you were raising a family during that time.
Right.
And then you started teaching in the
I went back
late
to
50s.
work when my oldest daughter went into first grade. I went back full time. That was in 58. And then I had a year's leave, 9 years after that, when we added to our family. But after that, I've been teaching straight through.
And how many children are there?
I have 3. I have 1 son and 2 daughters, and 5 grandchildren.
Well, so you had those early years in the 50s of finding your way somewhat by coincidence, somewhat by happenstance,
That's
into
right.
special education, and then that led one thing to another.
In 1980, I learned about the Office of Employment and Training, and they discovered me, and we've been together ever since. So I've been involved in all of their youth programs, because they run special programs for economically disadvantaged and handicapped. It's part of the JTPA program, Private Industry Council. So I've been involved with the Office of Employment and Training for over 16 years.
I'm getting a very busy picture of the 50s and the 60s, the 70s and the 80s, and also thinking about you raising those 3 children. How did you manage that juggling
I had a
act?
wonderful husband who was very supportive and took probably 70% of the responsibility. And I must say my children were cooperative. I was lucky. I think by the grace of God, you know, when you raise children, and my mother always used to say, no mother wants an unsuccessful child. The lowest of the low, we all want successful kids. And I was lucky. My kids did just fine, and I find that because they did, I feel an obligation to help my young people move in the same direction.
So you took your own independent spirit and your focus on
Still.
education and you handed it on to the next generation.
I'm still doing the same thing, giving
And-
the same lecture.
And how are they receiving it?
Well, well,
You find even in the lovely county of Marin, folks who really need this.
oh my,
this
oh
hand.
my, yes I do. The unfortunate thing, as I explained, is that CalLearn is only available for young people whose parents or who they themselves are on aid to families with dependent children. We have any number of teen pregnancies and teen parents because of the fact they're under 18, their parents have to support them. So they do not have the support of the CalLearn program, which makes me very sad because I think the mentoring and the caring and all of the extra attention that you pay now to these women to get their diplomas will make the biggest difference in their lives. But it's, I say, it's only available to a certain few.
You've seen some lives change.
Oh, absolutely. I've seen young people go on to getting skills in computers, getting jobs. Some young people being trained in office, getting jobs. Some of them, whatever they determine they want to do, if possible, we try to support that through the GAIN program. And it's going to be even more important with all these new welfare laws coming in, that we really focus in on giving them the self-esteem and the ability to get off of welfare.
All the resources that they
That's
need.
right.
You yourself, Ruth, have been a tremendous resource. One of the folks who nominated you for the Hall of Fame referred to you as her energizer. How is it that you energize other human beings?
I don't know. Probably because I'm a nervous wreck and make them nervous too. But what I'm finding is very interesting. I've had the same phone number for 47 years. I can get a call from someone that I finished with like 3-4 years ago to ask, they want to go back to college, you know, what to do and how to do it. And then I would say, why did you call me? I haven't heard from you in 4 years. Because you know everybody. Well, anybody who's been in Marin County for as long as I have and in the educational system knows a lot of people. So, you know, I get that. And then I'll get calls from young women who maybe we didn't end up as the best of friends, but the employer wants her to have computer skills. I get a call, where should she go to school? I'm like illiterate at computer. So I go around and ask all my friends who are all with this internet and all this, you know, all this stuff with their websites and all, which I know nothing about. And I get her organized to go to Indian Valley, call her boss, get the check, mail it in. So, I mean, I'm like there. And I used to tell the girls who annoyed me, you watch and see, one day you're going to call that number and it's going to be disconnected.
That's hard to believe. So many people I know, I've also heard you referred to this way as a life raft.
Maybe.
And I think when you're talking about that number and the way that you connect people to other resources, you're talking about what we call now networking.
Oh, yes, it has a fancy name.
How did you get interested in that? And how do you remember back in the beginning how that network began?
Well, the first thing I did was go out into the community, you know, to place my special ed kids in work. And I found a lot of reluctant people that weren't that interested. So there was a lot of talk that went on. And then through Office of Employment and Training, I met up with a lot of different agencies. And when you're looking for resources to help people, you automatically tap someone else that you know, and then they give you someone to call. Well, in 47 years, you build up a lot of resources.
I'm thinking, too, 47 years ago when you started this kind of work, going out into the community, there must have been some resistance. There must have been some obstacles to overcome.
I always found with special ed youngsters, if I could convince the employer that I really was asking for him to be a teacher like I am, to feel that, you know, you have so much to give. It's just a selling job. I think I should have gone into sales. I'd probably be a lot richer. I don't know. I was selling a commodity here. I was selling the fact that my young people had a lot of potential. They needed to get beyond the fact that they may not have, you know, be, quote, as bright as, but they certainly can understand. And the biggest things that I had to overcome was the assumption on the part of the employer that if you just gave them a task all day long to do the same thing, forget it. It doesn't work. They had to have varied kinds of things to do, and they worked out well.
So you had to do some educating.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Yes. It must have taken a great deal of perseverance.
Stubbornness, I think.
I have the feeling that you've taught your students something about perseverance. What would you say to the younger generation about the ability to keep going?
Well, I think they really face a lot of problems now, the younger generation. Number one, I taught for 35 years. My husband taught for 39. We went to work, we stayed there. I don't know any young person today, whether he's out of high school or out of college, that stays at one job. Either they leave because they're bored, or they're quote, downsizing. And my heart goes out to any young person that is out there, you know, marketing his skills and having a hard time getting placed. You just have to keep going, even with the disappointments. And I can remember with my own children, they'd go for an interview and then they'd get the famous letter. I mean, that's really hard to take.
What is it that makes a person able to open up that envelope, read the letter, and still put one foot in front of the other?
A mommy that's willing to give him a hug at the end.
Yes. A mom or a teacher.
Dad, or a dad that says, okay, you were probably too good for them.
A support community of some kind.
Absolutely.
A mom or a dad or a teacher.
Someone that's going to say to them, oh, there are better jobs out there. They just didn't appreciate you, you know. Just go on, because they need a lot of that.
You know that there are some young people who are watching us now who have had a stray thought or two about being a teacher someday. Would you encourage them?
Oh, you have to like kids, and it's a wonderful job, I think. None of my children are teachers, but I've always had the philosophy, there are 3 things I never told my kids what to do. Never told them what school to go to when they graduated high school, never told them who to marry, and never told them what to do with their career life. So, but none of them ended up as teachers.
But if an 11-year-old girl came to you tomorrow and said, Mrs. Susler, I've been thinking about being a teacher, what do you think about that?
I would say that is a wonderful choice. However, when you get older, I think you should either volunteer in a recreation program. I think you should meet groups of kids, see how you relate to them, see if you like that. You know, some people don't like, say, 20 people in a room with them. I think they should kind of volunteer and experiment and then make a decision. Because that's what I did. I did recreation in the summer to see if I really liked being with kids.
As you think, all those years of experience of working with people in that transition, what do you think are the most important qualities?
I look back at young people who graduate from college and young people who are out of high school going for the, you know, they're not going to go on to another, quote, school. I think a feeling of worth to yourself that you can give to an employer when you sit down to have an interview. Now, he may not hire you, but you need to go in there all together and say, I'm this person. And you have to be positive about yourself. And a lot of young people go in for an interview and they never even ask questions. I mean, they're like so grateful to get the interview. Now, you may be so grateful, but not so grateful that you're ingratiating.
So a sense of worth in yourself.
Absolutely.
And a little bit of assertiveness.
And a sense that you're trained and you know what you're doing, and I have this to offer you, and if you don't want it, okay, I'll go on. But when you go in with fear, I think fear has an aura about it.
Was that ever an issue in your life? Do you remember any times when you faced down fear? Now.
Right while I'm
These
sitting
cameras
here.
turned on you.
That's what I think, not basically for myself, because I was very fortunate professionally, but I know that I have had this hurt and this fear for every one of my own children when they graduated and got their degrees and started to send out the resumes. I've gone through it with each one of them. So, I mean, I may not have done it on myself, but I certainly have experienced it for my children.
Yes,
and I think every parent does.
Vicariously. You have
Yes.
tremendous empathy. You put yourself in their shoes.
I think most parents do. I do that with my girls when they get rejected for some reason or other. And some of the young people are like living on their own, even though they're like 14, 15, 16. They've really been rejected, or they come from a dysfunctioning family. And so they need a lot of support and mentoring and all that stuff. And I do it for them too.
And as you look down the road toward the future for these folks who you've given that key moment of support to, what do you see?
But let me tell you what I hope to see. I hope to see that they remove themselves from AFDC before they get thrown off, that they have the skills to make a living for themselves and for their child, and to move on forward. Maybe go back to school afterwards, getting more skilled, and taking responsibility, and they do, of their children. That's the other thing you do with CalLearn. You case manage the children. You make sure that they have their shots. You know, all of that. That's all part and parcel of that program. But that's what I'd like to see happen to them, that they kiss welfare goodbye and that they become independent women and move forward.
Recently, it seems popular to believe that unless you have that self-esteem built very early in your life, there's really no hope for you. Now, your experience is different.
Well, the young people I get obviously have very poor self-esteem, so I'm starting with them when they're 15, 16, and maybe 14. No, it's not different from mine. My young people have never developed it. They come from backgrounds and environments where they haven't had that opportunity.
Some people would say it's too late to reach them.
It's never too late. I don't believe that. It's never too late. It's never too late to take a young woman who's been kind of disassociated, comes from a dysfunctioning family. It's never too late. I don't think.
And you can think of numbers of stories
definitely.
of folks whose lives have turned around.
Absolutely. And I don't do it on my own. I'm fortunate enough to have a big support system out there. I work with the GAIN counselors. Mary Botero is the other half of me. She takes over once they graduate. The teachers at Oracle have such empathy and caring for my young mothers. You know, there's a big support system out there. I couldn't do it by myself.
There is a community of care, isn't there? Yes.
Absolutely.
A lot of empathetic people.
Yes.
But empathy is an interesting virtue, isn't it? And not exactly rampant in our current culture.
No, it isn't. But when you come from the neighborhood I did, and, you know, I mean, we were a family. I mean, we empathized with everybody. My mother, I mean, that whole generation. I mean, my mother and her lady friends would read the Jewish paper, and they used to call it the Bentelet Brief. It was always one of these really sad stories, like Ann Landers, but sadder. And they would cry. And they would talk about this thing, and wow, yeah, that was part. I used to love to listen to them because every one of them would read the Jewish paper and that was the first thing they read. It was the Ann Landers.
So that empathy has been
Oh,
with you as
my.
long as you can remember.
Oh, yes.
Yes. And it's really powered your work with other people.
I don't know, pushy. Power. Pushy, I think.
Is there anything else that you would like to say to the young people that are listening to us?
I would like to tell them that they are really worth something and never give up.
Is everybody really worth something?
I think so. In my eyes, everybody is worth something. And you go, you know, I have nothing but respect for the young people who are at the continuation schools like Miwa or San Andreas now, at North Marin. They're going to a different drummer, but they're going. You know, they're worth something. Maybe they weren't worth anything in the total environment of the high school, but there's a lot of, you know, interesting young people, and they're very bright. They're just different.
As you look back, is there anything that you would do differently?
I'm very grateful for my life. I'm one of the few people who had a career and enjoyed it. I see so many people who get to my age and retire, and they look back with not any feeling of enjoyment. I've always loved teaching, and I've always loved being with young people.